This is Carrie Johnson with the Iowa Department of Management, and what I'm going to do today is present a series of 5 parts for a tax increment financing administration in the property valuation system training module. This is part 1 of this particular training module. If you're looking for general training about the system itself, what type of data is submitted in the system, how to upload data, things of that nature, please consult the general training module. It's a set of 6 different parts that'll provide you with a good general overview of the property valuation system. This particular set of videos is going to focus on administering TIF in the property valuation system. So whenever we start with TIF, we want to provide the general basics of tax increment financing. And so this part 1 is going to talk about an introduction and just sort of some background about tax increment financing and some of the basics. So what is TIF? Well, TIF is a method of reallocating property tax revenues that are a result of an increase in valuation above a base valuation figure. Tax revenues produced by property tax levies, except for certain excluded levies, including debt service, school, physical plant and equipment levy, and instructional support levies. So taxes produced by property tax levies other than those excluded ones that are imposed on the increased valuation by all levy authorities are then allocated back to the TIF authority to repay debt that they incurred to make projects happen in the urban renewal area. So who can actually do tax increment financing? Cities and counties can, according to Chapter 403 of the Code of Iowa. Their process is described in that chapter. Community colleges have had authority in Chapter 260E of the Code of Iowa, although at this point I'm not aware of any community colleges using this particular tool. Most of those areas are being phased out over time. Another TIF authority is rural improvement zones. So those are recreational lake districts that set up a rural improvement zone to generate revenue to pay for projects within that particular rural improvement zone, usually related to maintaining the recreational lake district. The information regarding their process is found in Chapter 357H of the Code of Iowa. So what is the urban renewal process itself? So a city or county would first adopt an urban renewal plan. So if we talk about cities and counties, Chapter 403, which is their segment of the Code of Iowa that sets forth their process, requires a resolution of necessity. So basically a resolution saying we need to create an urban renewal plan in an urban renewal area. This resolution would designate the sort of purpose or reason behind this urban renewal plan as slum or blight elimination or economic development or a combination of the two, and basically say that the rehabilitation or development of this particular area is in the best interests of the public. It's also going to set the boundaries for where this area is occurring, what are the objectives and projects of the plan. The plan is going to be submitted to a planning commission if applicable within the community. There's a notice and there's a public hearing on the plan, and there's also consultation with the affected levy authorities. I will underscore, though, while cities and counties are required to have a consultation with the affected levy authorities, so for instance, the school or the county, if it's a city urban renewal, a consultation is required to happen, but those entities, those affected levy authorities, are not able to prevent the urban renewal plan from occurring or from being adopted. There are, of course, boundary restrictions where cities and counties can operate their activities. Cities operate within the city limits, but they can also operate within the 2-mile area outside the city if the county consents to them operating in that area. Counties operate in the area outside the 2-mile area that surrounds the city, but they can also operate within the 2-mile area or even within the city if agreed to by the city. So there may be situations where, say, a city and county determine it's in their best interest to undertake an urban renewal plan and projects within the city limits, but maybe the city doesn't have very much debt capacity, so they cooperate with the county, and the county sets up the urban renewal area, and it's sort of a cooperative agreement where they both determine that this is the best interest for their local community and county. Ag land restrictions, slum or blighted areas cannot be included, cannot include ag land in their boundaries. Economic development areas cannot include ag land or century farmland unless the owner agrees. So obviously, if you have an owner of ag land that has undeveloped property and would like to see it developed, then they would agree to having their property be part of the urban rural area, and then it can be developed. After adoption of an urban renewal plan, a city or county would adopt an ordinance to actually initiate tax increment financing. So they have the plan that they adopt by resolution, but then to actually get TIF revenue generated, to have that authority, they need to adopt an ordinance to initiate tax increment financing. Keep in mind that urban renewal plans and TIF ordinances can be amended at any time. So areas can be added to an urban renewal plan, or different projects can be added. Area can be removed. These amendments can happen at any time in any given year. TIF projects and debt. A TIF authority would initiate projects. So they would do some infrastructure work where they might bond to do some activities. They would provide for economic development loans or grants or developer agreements. They would work to do some slum and blight elimination, maybe do some building demolition, things of that nature. And the TIF authority would then incur debt. And the debt would take the place or take the form of rebate agreements or developer agreements, internal loans. So maybe they borrow from their general fund to do some particular work in the urban renewal area, and they intend to pay themselves back with TIF revenue. Or another form of debt, of course, is traditional bonds or notes that they would issue debt in a formal manner and indicate that their intent is to repay that debt with TIF revenue generated. As far as sunsets go, or when these items, when these areas would end, slum and blight designated urban renewal areas have no sunset, so they can continue in perpetuity. Economic development designations have a sunset of 20 years for newer plans that are adopted after January 1 of 1995. And keep in mind, some of these that were adopted recently after January 1 of 1995 may be nearing expiration. So if you have some that have been going for close to 20 years, make sure that you're aware of their end dates and are planning accordingly as far as communicating with your local TIF authorities, with your cities, and saying, okay, what's your understanding here with the time frame of this particular urban renewal plan, and just have that discussion and make sure you have a plan in place. Economic development for non-LMI housing is a 10 or 15 year conditional time limit. So those economic development plans that are particular for developing non-LMI, which is low and moderate income housing, have a shorter time span. The frozen base here, the 100% frozen, the 100% base valuation is established for those ordinances, TIF ordinances adopted on or after January 1 of 1995. So those, again, sort of newer plans. The 100% frozen base valuation is the valuation on January 1 of the calendar year prior to the year in which TIF indebtedness is first certified with the county auditor. So the reference there is Iowa Code Section 403-19-1A. So you'd want to take a look and make sure you understand, what is the base year valuation for the year prior to the year in which indebtedness is first certified. TIF ordinances adopted prior to January 1 of 1995, so some of those older TIF areas, the 100% frozen base valuation was the valuation on January 1 of the calendar year prior to the year in which the TIF Ordinance was adopted. So a little bit different mechanism there. TIF Debt Certification. So the certification of TIF debt is due to the county by December 1. So your TIF authorities, whether that be the cities in your county or you as a county itself, if you are operating a TIF, the certification of TIF debt is due by December 1. The county completes TIF reconciliation forms and sends those to the TIF authorities as soon as possible after December 1. So incorporating that information received as of December 1, the county is going to take a look and try to reconcile for each and every TIF area that a TIF entity has, the amount of revenue that has been received, the amount of debt that's still outstanding, and use those reconciliation forms to get on the same page as those TIF authorities. The county auditor provides TIF taxes without further certification unless additional debt is incurred or the TIF authority is requesting fewer TIF taxes. So there's different ways that folks would certify their TIF debt to a county. One example would be they issue some general obligation bonds and they certify to the county the full amount of the general obligation bonds. Their intent is to abate that full amount with TIF revenue to pay it back with TIF revenue. So they certify that full general obligation bond. Maybe that's the only debt that they incur and the only thing they are indicating that they want paid back with TIF revenue. So they do that initial certification, and unless there's some sort of change, additional debt, or they want to decertify some of that debt, they don't need to do anything further on December 1. But of course, if they then went on to create a rebate agreement with one of the developers, they needed to certify that debt for repayment. So they need to complete the certification forms, or say they are paying that GO bond from a different source. They're not paying it fully from TIF revenue. They need to decertify part of it. They would need to communicate that to the county auditor, what have you. The reconciliation and the certification forms are found on the Department of Management County Resource page. So that's that dom.iowa.gov/counties. And this is just an example of what the forms look like. They haven't changed. If you've had forms from prior years, we've not made any changes to those forms. They are simply an Excel form that you can use for your own reference. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact me. The rest of the process about setting up TIF districts and working with TIF in the property valuation system will be covered in the further modules of this training.